Chapter 1. The Night. She ran. The rain came down in sheets, turning the cobblestones into black mirrors that reflected nothing but darkness. Evelyn Clark ran through the empty streets of Grey Hollow, her breath tearing from her lungs in ragged gasps, her widow's black soaked through and clinging to her skin like a second mourning veil. She shouldn't have come to the old district. She knew better. Everyone knew better. But the solicitor's letter had been clear. Her late husband's debts exceeded anything she could pay. The house, her only shelter, would be seized by week's end. The whispered rumor at the market, spoken by a woman with knowing eyes, had seemed like providence. There was work in the old quarter, if you were desperate enough. If you were brave enough. Evelyn had thought herself both. She'd been wrong. The men who'd followed her from the tavern hadn't wanted to hire a seamstress. They'd wanted something else entirely, and when she'd understood the nature of their employment offer, she'd run. Now their footsteps echoed behind her, closer with each passing second, and the narrow streets twisted like a maze designed by a madman. Nowhere to go. Love, one of them called, his voice slurred with drink and malice. Make it easy on yourself. Evelyn's boot caught on the hem of her skirt. She stumbled, catching herself against an iron gate that materialized from the rain-soaked darkness. Her palms struck cold metal, ornate and ancient, and beyond it, a courtyard, overgrown, abandoned, and a door, slightly ajar, spilling the faintest thread of golden light onto wet stone. She didn't think. Thinking was a luxury for women who had choices. She shoved through the gate and ran for that impossible light, her pursuers' shouts rising behind her like the baying of hounds. The door gave beneath her weight. She fell across the threshold into warmth and silence so complete, it felt like stepping into another world. Behind her, the rain and the shouting continued. But here there was only stillness and blood. She smelled it before she saw it, copper sweet and overwhelming. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light of candles burning in sconces along stone walls. The room was vast, cathedral high, furnished with pieces that belonged in a museum. Tapestries depicting battles under crimson moons, furniture carved from dark wood inlaid with silver, and on the floor, a trail of blood leading deeper into the house. Evelyn's instinct screamed at her to leave. But outside, the men had reached the gate. She heard them rattling it, cursing. The gate that had opened so easily for her now seemed locked against them. She followed the blood. It led through corridors lined with portraits whose subjects seemed to watch her pass, their eyes too knowing, too alive. The house smelled of old incense and older secrets. Every logical thought told her to turn back, but the sound of fists pounding on the outer door drove her forward. The blood trail ended at a set of double doors, partially open. Beyond them, she heard something that made her blood freeze, a wet, rattling breath, the sound of something, in pain. Evelyn pushed the door open. The room beyond was a study, lined with books that climbed to a vaulted ceiling painted with constellations she didn't recognize. A fire burned low in a massive hearth, and before it, collapsed in a chair that might have been a throne, sat a man. No, not a man. Even in the firelight, even with his head bowed and his body still, she knew he was something else. Something other. His skin held a pallor that had nothing to do with blood loss, though there was plenty of that. His shirt was torn, revealing wounds that should have been fatal. Claw marks, she thought, as if something with talons had tried to gut him. His hair was dark, falling forward to hide his face. His hands, long-fingered and elegant, gripped the arms of the chair with enough force to crack the wood. Leave. His voice came low, rough with pain. He didn't look up. This house is not for you. Evelyn should have run. Every instinct, every prayer her mother had taught her, screamed that she stood in the presence of damnation itself. Instead, she found herself stepping forward. You're hurt. I am beyond your help. Now he did look up, and Evelyn's heart stopped. His eyes were silver. Not blue or gray or any color that belonged to the living world. Silver, like moonlight on water, like mercury, like something molten and ancient and utterly inhuman. The They fixed on her with an intensity that pinned her in place as surely as a collector's pin through a butterfly's wing. But beneath the inhumanity, she saw something else. Something she recognized from her own mirror these past 6 months. Pain. Bone deep and soul dark and desperately hidden. Those men outside, she heard herself say. They're hunting me. Something flickered in those silver eyes. And you sought shelter in a monster's den. Poor choice, widow. He knew what she was. How he knew, she couldn't say. But the title hung between them like an accusation. The gate opened for me, Evelyn said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Your door was unlocked. If you wanted me gone, you could have kept me out. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, more acknowledgement of a point scored. The house has a will of its own. Sometimes. His breathing hitched, and fresh blood bloomed across his ruined shirt. It appears to have chosen poorly tonight. Outside, the pounding on the door had stopped. Evelyn heard voices arguing, then footsteps, retreating. Silence settled over the house like a held breath. They're gone, she whispered. For now. Those silver eyes never left her face. They won't come past the gate. Not without invitation. Not into Ashford House. Ashford. The name struck a chord of memory. Old stories, whispered warnings. The vampire houses of Grey Hollow, who'd ruled these streets for centuries before the modern world pushed them to the shadows. You're one of them, Evelyn breathed. You're dying, he finished, and the word carried neither drama nor plea. Simply fact. The covenant binds us. No vampire may kill another except in formal challenge. Varric broke the law. His house will answer for it. But first, his eyes closed. First, I must survive until dawn. Evelyn looked at the blood, at the wounds, at the creature before her who should have been her nightmare, but instead looked like a portrait of tragic nobility, painted by a melancholy master. She thought of the streets outside, the men who'd hunted her, the solicitor's letter, the empty house that would soon belong to strangers. She thought of having nothing left to lose. Tell me how to help you, she said. His eyes opened, surprise flickering across features that seemed carved from marble. You would help me. Knowing what I am? You let me in when I was hunted, Evelyn said simply. Seems only fair I return the favor. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then incredibly, he laughed, a dark, pained sound that ended in a grimace. Foolish woman, he murmured. Beautiful, foolish woman. My name is Matthias Ashford, and if you truly mean to help me survive the night, you should know. The blood debt you'll incur may bind you to me longer than you imagine. Evelyn met those silver eyes and felt her fate shift, like a door closing behind her and another opening ahead into unknown darkness. Tell me what to do. Chapter 2. Blood and bargains. Matthias Ashford watched the widow through eyes that had seen centuries pass and tried to remember the last time a human had surprised him. It had been decades. Perhaps longer. The wounds, he said, each word costing him, were made by silver-tipped claws. The metal burns. Prevents healing. You'll find the kit, black leather case, third shelf, behind the astronomy texts. The woman, Evelyn, her name was Evelyn Clark. He'd heard it whispered in her thoughts when fear had made her mind loud. Moved with surprising efficiency. No swooning, no hysterics. She located the case, brought it to him, opened it to reveal instruments that gleamed in the firelight. These look surgical, she observed. Because they are. Matthias gripped the chair harder as another wave of pain crested through him. The silver must be removed. Each fragment. If even one piece remains, the poison will spread. By dawn, I'll be ash. Her hands stilled over the instruments. I'm not a surgeon. No, but you've steady hands. I can see the calluses. You're a seamstress. You understand precision. He met her eyes, saw the fear there, but also something else. Determination. The kind born of having nothing left to lose. The alternative is I die. And when Varric's hunters return, and they will return, you'll face them alone. It was manipulation, pure and simple. He wasn't proud of it, But survival had long ago taught him that pride was a luxury. Evelyn Clark set her jaw. Tell me what to do. Over the next hour, Matthias learned that the widow had a spine of steel beneath her mourning blacks. She didn't flinch when he tore open his ruined shirt, revealing the full extent of the damage. 4 parallel slashes across his chest and abdomen, each one glittering with embedded silver fragments. She didn't hesitate when he handed her a pair of surgical forceps, his instructions crisp, despite the agony. Start with the largest pieces. Work quickly. I'll heal around anything you leave behind. What she did do was bite her lip until it bled while she worked. Her concentration absolute. Tell me about Varric, she said quietly, extracting the first silver shard. It came free with a wet sound that made her pale, but her hands never shook. Matthias understood the tactic. Distraction through conversation. Clever. Lord Varric rules House Corvin. Ravens and carrion crows. They've always been ambitious. And you? House Ashford. Wolves and winter storms. He hissed as she removed another fragment. Already he could feel his body beginning to respond, flesh knitting at the edges of the wounds. We're old blood. First houses. We remember the covenant when it was written in human blood beneath a harvest moon. Her hands paused. The covenant? The laws that govern us. No vampire may kill another except in formal challenge before the Night Court. No vampire may turn a human without their consent freely given thrice. No vampire may feed unto death without judgment. He watched her face, gauging her reaction. We're not the monsters your stories paint us, widow. We're simply ancient. And bound by rules your kind forgot when they built their churches over our sacred groves. But Varric broke the rules. She was working on the 3rd wound now, deeper than the others, her brow furrowed in concentration. He ambushed me during the neutral hours, when such attacks are forbidden. He seeks to claim Ashford territory, but he lacks the courage to challenge me openly. Matthias felt the silver leave his flesh, felt the blessed relief as his body surged toward healing. He'll pay for his cowardice. The Night Court convenes in 3 days. I need only survive until then. 3 days, Evelyn repeated softly. And those men outside? The ones hunting me? Varric's human servants, paid well to keep eyes on my movements, to ensure I died alone and unmourned. His lips curved bitterly. They didn't expect you. Neither did you. No, he admitted. The house, as I said, it has a will. It hasn't opened its doors to a stranger in 50 years. Not since, he stopped, since. It doesn't matter. The memory rose anyway. Elena, who'd sheltered here during the influenza outbreak of 1918, who'd tended his library and filled these silent halls with laughter until the sickness claimed her, despite everything he'd tried. Old ghosts, old grief, Evelyn's hand stilled. She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw recognition, not of his pain's specifics, but of its shape. She knew grief, intimately. I'm sorry, she said simply, and returned to her work. The last silver fragment came free as the grandfather clock in the corner struck midnight. Evelyn sat back, exhausted, her hands stained with his blood, black in the firelight, not red. Vampire blood, old and strange. It's done? She asked. Matthias took inventory of his body. The wounds were closing, flesh knitting together with the peculiar tingling sensation of accelerated healing. By dawn, only scars would remain, and by the next nightfall, even those would fade. It's done, he confirmed. You saved my life, Evelyn Clark. She wiped her hands on a cloth from the kit, her movements mechanical. You saved mine first. The gate, the door, the house saved you. I was too far gone to consciously invite anyone across the threshold. He rose from the chair, testing his restored mobility. Everything functioned. Everything held. Which means the debt is yours. You invoked guest right by entering. You reinforced it by offering aid. Under the old laws, I owe you protection until the debt is satisfied. Evelyn's eyes widened. I don't understand. You bound yourself to me tonight, widow. Not through magic or compulsion, but through the older laws, the ones that governed hospitality and honor before your churches, before your kingdoms. You saved my life. Now I'm bound to preserve yours. He watched understanding dawn across her features, followed by something that might have been panic. For how long? Until the threat to you has passed. Until Varric's servants no longer hunt you. Until... Matthias moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. She smelled of rain and fear and something underneath. Lavender, perhaps, from sachets kept in drawers to make mourning clothes bearable. Until I deem the debt paid, and if I want to leave, the gate will open for you. The house won't hold you prisoner. He tilted his head, studying her. But tell me, Evelyn Clark, where would you go? Back to your empty house and your husband's debts? Back to the streets where men hunt you? Or will you stay here in the monster's den where at least the monsters follow rules? She stood slowly, drawing herself up to her full height, still a head shorter than him, still fragile in the way all humans were fragile. But something in her bearing reminded him of queens he'd known, centuries ago. If I stay, she said carefully, I want terms. Despite everything, the pain, the danger, the sheer impossibility of this night, Matthias Ashford smiled. A real smile, the first in longer than he could remember. Then let us negotiate, widow. I find myself entertained by your audacity. Outside, the rain continued to fall on Grey Hollow's ancient streets. Inside Ashford House, a vampire and a widow began to bargain for survival, neither knowing that the debt between them would prove far more binding than blood or law could ever decree. Chapter 3. The Terms of Shelter Evelyn. Clark had negotiated exactly twice in her life. Once when buying fabric from a difficult merchant, and once when her husband's creditors had come calling the week after his funeral. She'd lost both times. She refused to lose again. I want a room of my own, she said, meeting Matthias Ashford's silver gaze without flinching, with a lock on the inside of the door. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or respect. Granted, the East Wing has 17 bedrooms. Choose whichever suits you. I want freedom to move through the house during daylight hours. Also granted, I sleep during the day as my kind must. The house will be yours until sunset. He leaned against the mantel, his posture deceptively casual despite the blood still staining his pale skin. Continue. Evelyn's heart hammered, but she pressed on. I want your word, your binding word, under whatever laws you follow, that you won't feed from me without my explicit consent. Now his expression shifted, becoming something cooler, more guarded. You understand what you ask? Blood sustains us. Denying a vampire access to sustenance in his own home is exactly what I'm doing, Evelyn interrupted, surprised by her own boldness. You said I invoked guest right. That means I'm under your protection. But protection without boundaries isn't safety. It's captivity. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Outside, the rain had softened to a whisper against the windows. Matthias studied her with an intensity that made her feel transparent, as though he could see every secret fear, every desperate calculation behind her demands. Finally, he spoke. You're right to ask, and I give you my word. Bound by the covenant and my house name, I will not feed from you without your consent, freely given and uncoerced. He paused. But understand, I will need to feed. There are alternatives, arrangements I've made, but you'll see things, hear things that may disturb you. As long as those things don't involve me, Evelyn said firmly. As long as you consent, he corrected. Is there more? She'd prepared a mental list during the long hour of extracting silver from his flesh, thinking through every terrible possibility. I want to know what's happening. No secrets about the danger I'm in, or about Varric, or about what happens in 3 days at this night court. Transparency, unusual for dealings between my kind and yours. Matthias moved away from the mantel, circling her slowly, not threatening but assessing. We prefer to keep humans ignorant. It's safer for everyone. I stopped being safe the moment I walked through your gate, Evelyn said. I'd rather face danger with knowledge than stumble through it blind. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the inhuman quality of his skin. Too smooth, too perfect, like porcelain that had never known the sun. Very well. I'll tell you what you need to know. But some truths, widow, carry their own weight. When spoken, they can't be unheard. I'll bear it. Will you? His head tilted. a gesture that reminded her unsettlingly of a predator evaluating prey. Your husband, how did he die? The question struck like a physical blow. Evelyn's breath caught, her carefully constructed composure cracking. We're not discussing, but we are. His voice softened, losing its edge. You want transparency? Then it must flow both ways. You ask me to open my world to you. The politics, the dangers, the ancient hatreds. In return, I need to understand who shelters under my roof, who I'm protecting, and from what. Evelyn's throat tightened. She hadn't spoken of it. Not to the solicitor. Not to the pitying neighbors. Not to anyone. The shame of it had been a stone in her chest for 6 months, growing heavier with each passing day. Thomas, she began. Then stopped. Started again. My husband gambled. Cards, horses, anything he could wager on. I didn't know, not until after. He was good at hiding it. Good at lying. The words came faster now, pressured by months of silence. He died in the street outside a gambling house. They said it was his heart, but I think someone killed him. Over a debt or an accusation of cheating. No one would tell me. No one wanted a widow asking questions. She looked up at Matthias, expecting judgment or dismissal. Instead, she found something unexpected. Understanding. And he left you with nothing but his debts and his shame. Matthias said quietly. Yes, I see it now, the way you hold yourself. The way you negotiated just now, as if expecting to lose. You've been betrayed by someone you trusted, someone who was supposed to protect you. Tears burned behind Evelyn's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I don't need your pity. Good, because I don't offer it. He turned away, moving to a cabinet near the window. Pity is for the helpless. You're not helpless, Evelyn Clark. You're angry. There's a difference. He was right. Beneath the grief and the fear, beneath the exhaustion and the desperate scramble for survival, there was anger, hot and bright and sustaining. I am angry, she admitted. At Thomas for destroying us. At myself for not seeing it. At the world for offering women like me no choices but bad ones. Then we have common ground. Matthias opened the cabinet, revealing bottles of dark liquid. Wine, she assumed, though she couldn't be certain of anything in this house. I'm angry too, at Varric for his ambition, at the Night Court for centuries of games and politics, at time itself for taking everyone I've ever... He stopped, closing the cabinet without taking anything. The silence that fell between them felt different now. Less adversarial, more like two wounded creatures recognizing each other in the dark. Your terms are acceptable, Matthias said finally. A room of your own, freedom during daylight, no feeding without consent, and full transparency about the danger we face. In return, you'll remain in this house until the Night Court convenes and Varric's threat is answered. 3 days. Can you bear my company that long? 3 days. 72 hours in a vampire's house, surrounded by shadows and secrets and a man. No, a creature, who looked at her as though he could see straight through to her bones. 3 days, versus a lifetime of running from debts and predators, and the grinding poverty that awaited women with no husband and no prospects. I can bear it, Evelyn said. Then we have an agreement. Matthias extended his hand, a strangely formal gesture. Guest and host, debtor and protector. For 3 days, Evelyn Clark, you're under the protection of House Ashford. She took his hand. His skin was cool, not cold, but lacking the heat of living flesh. His grip was gentle, controlled, as though he feared his own strength. For 3 days, she echoed. But even as she spoke the words, something in Matthias's silver eyes suggested he knew what she was only beginning to suspect. That 3 days might not be nearly enough time to untangle the threads of fate that had drawn them together, or perhaps it would be far too much. Chapter 4. The habits of immortals, Evelyn woke to sunlight. For a moment, disoriented by sleep and strange surroundings, she couldn't remember where she was. The bed beneath her was too soft, the sheets too fine, the ceiling above her painted with celestial maps that belonged in a cathedral, not a bedroom. Then memory returned in a rush. The rain, the chase, the vampire bleeding in his chair, the bargain struck in firelight. She sat up slowly, taking inventory of the room Matthias had led her to near dawn. The east wing, he'd said, as far from his own chambers as the house allowed. The room was beautiful in a melancholy way, all dark wood and faded velvet, with windows that overlooked a garden gone wild with neglect. A wardrobe stood open, revealing gowns from another era, carefully preserved. A vanity held brushes with ivory handles and a mirror that needed resilvering. Someone had lived here once. Someone Matthias had cared for. Evelyn rose, still wearing her damp morning dress from the night before. Her practical side asserted itself. She needed dry clothes, food, and information about the house's layout. The first two were necessities. The third was survival. She found a dressing gown in the wardrobe, deep green silk that whispered against her skin, and ventured into the corridor. Ashford House in daylight was a revelation. What had seemed gothic and forbidding in the darkness now revealed itself as simply old, magnificently, impossibly old. The corridors were lined with portraits dating back centuries, the subject's clothing marking the passage of time. Doublets and ruffs giving way to frock coats, then modern suits, then nothing at all as the portraits ceased around 1920. No photographs, nothing contemporary, as if the house had stopped acknowledging the outside world decades ago. Evelyn's exploration led her to a kitchen that seemed caught between eras. A modern refrigerator hummed beside a cast-iron stove that belonged in a museum. The cabinets held an odd mixture, fresh bread and cheese alongside dusty tins of tea from the 1940s. Someone had been shopping recently, but without much enthusiasm or knowledge of human needs. She made tea and toast, eating mechanically while studying the kitchen's details. A calendar on the wall showed October 2025, but the pages were pristine, never turned, never marked. A newspaper sat folded on the counter, dated 3 weeks prior, with a headline about local politics she didn't recognize. Evidence of a life lived in isolation, a vampire maintaining the bare minimum of connection to the mortal world. "You're up early." Evelyn spun, nearly dropping her teacup. Matthias stood in the doorway, wearing different clothes than the night before. Black trousers and a shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. The wounds were gone, she noted. Completely healed, as if they'd never existed. "I thought you slept during the day," she said, fighting to calm her racing heart. "I do. Usually." He moved into the kitchen with that peculiar grace she was beginning to recognize. Too fluid, too precise. "But the house is unsettled. It knows there's a guest. It hasn't decided yet whether to be pleased or alarmed. The house has opinions. Old places develop them, given enough time and enough blood spilled within their walls." He glanced at her tea with something like amusement. "You found the kitchen. Good. I wasn't certain what provisions were adequate. I don't entertain often. When was the last time someone stayed here?" The question escaped before Evelyn could consider whether it was wise to ask. Matthias was quiet for a long moment. 57 years. A young woman named Elena. She worked in my library during the day, cataloging books. She died of influenza in this house, in the room where you slept last night. The revelation sent a chill through Evelyn, despite the warm tea in her hands. "I'm sleeping in a dead woman's room?" "You're sleeping in a room that hasn't been used since a good woman died there, yes." His silver eyes met hers steadily. "I've preserved it as she left it. A memorial of sorts. But the house opened that door for you last night, which means something. I'm not yet certain what." Evelyn thought of the gowns in the wardrobe, the brushes on the vanity, a life interrupted, a grief preserved in furniture and fabric. "You loved her," she said softly. "I cared for her. There's a difference." But the way he said it suggested the distinction mattered deeply to him. She was kind. She didn't fear me, and when the sickness took her, I tried. He stopped abruptly. "It doesn't matter. She's gone. They're all gone. That's the nature of being what I am." The loneliness in his voice was a physical thing, heavy as stones. Evelyn found herself responding to it despite every instinct warning her to maintain distance. "How old are you?" she asked. 432 years. Give or take a decade. You lose count after the first few centuries." He moved to the window, gazing out at the overgrown garden. "I was turned during the reign of Elizabeth, by a vampire who believed I'd make a useful addition to House Ashford. I was a soldier then, good with a sword, better with strategy, and now I'm an anachronism. A relic of blood oaths and ancient covenants in a world that's forgotten how to believe in monsters. He turned back to her. But you wanted transparency, so here it is. I'm old, Evelyn. Old and tired and bound by rules that matter to fewer and fewer of my kind. Varric represents the new way. Ambition without honor, power without responsibility. The Night Court will judge him, but even if they rule in my favor, there will be others. There are always others. The weariness in his words struck something in Evelyn's chest. She'd felt that same exhaustion after Thomas died. That sense of fighting battles that could never truly be won. Why not just leave? She asked. If you're tired of it, why stay? Because this house is my responsibility. The territory it represents is my charge. And because he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because if the old houses fall, if vampires like Varric rise unchecked, the covenant dies with us. And without the covenant, without the laws that bind us, my kind becomes exactly what your stories claim. Monsters who feed and kill without consequence. So you're protecting humans, Evelyn said slowly. By maintaining the old ways. I'm protecting everyone, human and vampire alike. His expression was grim. Order prevents chaos. Rules prevent slaughter. It's not noble. It's simply necessary. Evelyn studied him in the morning light streaming through the windows. This ancient creature who spoke of duty and loneliness, who preserved dead women's rooms like shrines, who bled to protect laws that few remembered. You need to sleep, she said finally. You look half dead yourself. His laugh was unexpected, short and genuine. Accurate given my condition. Yes, I should rest. The house is yours until sunset. Explore if you wish. Most doors will open for you. The library, the conservatory, the main halls. A few won't. Don't force them. Why not? Because some rooms hold things even I prefer not to disturb. He moved toward the doorway, then paused. Evelyn, thank you. For last night. For your steady hands and your courage. I've forgotten what it's like to be surprised by a human. You've reminded me. He was gone before she could respond, moving with that inhuman speed that left only displaced air in his wake. Evelyn sat alone in the kitchen, her tea gone cold, and tried to reconcile the vampire of legend with the weary man who just thanked her for saving his life. Outside, the sun climbed higher. Inside Ashford House, a widow began to understand that monsters, like humans, could be more complicated than the stories suggested, and sometimes more tragic. Chapter 5. Threads of Silver Evelyn. Spent the day exploring Ashford. House like a woman cataloging a museum built for an audience of ghosts. The library was her first destination. 3 stories of books, climbing toward a domed ceiling painted with constellations, that shifted when she wasn't looking directly at them. Impossible. But she'd stopped questioning impossibility somewhere around the 3rd vampire revelation. The collection was staggering. Volumes in Latin and Greek, illuminated manuscripts under glass, first editions that would make collectors weep, and in the corner, a desk with papers scattered across its surface. Recent papers, covered in Matthias's precise handwriting. Evelyn knew she shouldn't look. But transparency went both ways, didn't it? And these weren't hidden. They were left in plain view, as if he'd been working until the moment dawn forced him to retreat. She lifted the top page. A letter, half finished. To the Night Court of Greyhollow, I write to formally charge Lord Varric of House Corvin with violation of the covenant. Specifically, unprovoked assault during neutral hours, attempted murder of a first house lord, and conspiracy to claim territory through unlawful means. I invoke my right to trial before the assembled houses and demand. The letter ended there, the last word trailing off as if he'd lost faith in what he was writing. Beneath it, another document, older, yellowed with age. A list of names written in the same hand, but dated 1847. Next to each name, a date of death, Eleanor Ashford, 1847, fever Samuel. Ashford, 1851, consumption Margaret. Ashford, 1862, childbirth William. Ashford, 1889, influenza. The list continued for pages. Decades of names, decades of deaths. People Matthias had known, perhaps loved, who'd aged and died while he remained unchanged. At the bottom, In fresher ink, Elena Morrison, 1968, influenza. And below that, one final line that made Evelyn's breath catch. Why do I keep building families from humans who cannot stay? She set the papers down carefully, her hands trembling. The loneliness she'd sensed in him wasn't just isolation. It was grief compounded over centuries, layer upon layer of loss, until caring for anyone must feel like courting inevitable heartbreak. How did immortals bear it? How did they continue, knowing everyone they loved would turn to dust? Find anything interesting? Evelyn spun. Matthias stood in the library doorway, his appearance so sudden she knew he'd used that inhuman speed again. But his expression wasn't angry, merely curious and perhaps resigned. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I shouldn't have looked at your personal papers. I was just curious. Yes, I would be too in your position. He moved into the library, his bare feet silent on the polished floors. He wore different clothes again, just loose trousers and a shirt hanging open, as if he'd dressed hastily. I thought you'd be in the conservatory or the music room. The library seemed too obvious. I like books, Evelyn said simply. They've been constant when people weren't. Something shifted in his silver eyes. Yes, I understand that particular preference. He crossed to the desk, looking down at the scattered papers. His expression was unreadable, but she saw his jaw tighten when his gaze fell on the list of names. You keep track, Evelyn observed quietly, of everyone you've lost. Someone should remember them. Their families are gone now, their graves forgotten. I'm all that remains of their stories. He picked up the list, his fingers careful on the fragile paper. Elena was the last. After her, I stopped letting humans close. Stopped pretending I could build anything lasting with mortals who'd be gone in a heartbeat of my existence. Until the house opened its doors to me, Evelyn said. Until the house betrayed me. Yes, but there was no real bitterness in his voice. I woke at sunset to find you in my kitchen, wearing Elena's dressing gown, looking like... He stopped, shook his head. Never mind. Like what? Like you belonged here. Like the house had been waiting for you. He set the list down. It's foolish. The house is stone and wood and old magic. It doesn't wait for anyone. But Evelyn heard the uncertainty beneath his words, the hope he was trying not to feel. How long were you awake before you came to find me? She asked, changing the subject before the weight of that hope crushed them both. Long enough to sense that something was wrong. The wards I set around the property, they're being tested. Varric's people are watching the house. They haven't approached, but they're there. In the streets beyond the gate. His expression darkened. They're waiting for something. A mistake. A moment when you venture outside and I'm not aware. Fear trickled down Evelyn's spine. I thought the house would protect me. Within the walls, yes. The property line, yes. But if you cross the gate... He moved closer, his intensity suddenly focused entirely on her. You cannot leave, Evelyn. Not for any reason. Not until the night court convenes tomorrow night and this matter is settled. Tomorrow? She'd lost track of time in the windowless corridors, the endless day of exploration. I thought we had 3 days. Last night was the first. Today is the second. Tomorrow at midnight, the court gathers in the old cathedral beneath the city. They'll hear my testimony, examine the evidence, and render judgment. He reached out as if to touch her arm, then stopped himself, hand falling back to his side. Varric will be there. His allies will be there. And while vampire law forbids violence on neutral ground, accidents happen. You think he'll try to kill you again? I think he'll try to finish what he started. And if I'm dead, you lose the protection of my house. You become... He hesitated, clearly weighing how much truth to share. I become what? Evelyn pressed. A loose end. A human witness to vampire politics who could expose secrets we've kept for centuries. Varric can't let you live, Evelyn. Not if I'm gone. The reality of her situation crashed over her like a wave. She'd known she was in danger, but she'd thought it was about the men who'd chased her. Common thugs motivated by base desires. She hadn't understood that she'd stumbled into something far older and more deadly. A war between immortals where humans were nothing more than collateral damage. Then, you have to survive tomorrow night, she said, forcing strength into her voice she didn't entirely feel. Because I didn't endure 6 months of widowhood, poverty, and humiliation just to die in a vampire's power play. Matthias stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. Not the bitter expression she'd seen before, but something genuine. "You're remarkable," he said softly. "Has anyone told you that?" "Not recently." Evelyn lifted her chin. "What do you need from me? How can I help?" "You've already helped more than you know. But tonight..." He glanced toward the windows where dusk was deepening into night. "Tonight I need to feed. Properly. To be at full strength for tomorrow. And I need you to understand what that means." Evelyn's pulse quickened, remembering her terms. No feeding without consent. But he wasn't asking to feed from her, was he? "I don't understand," she admitted. "You will. Come with me. There's something you need to see." He extended his hand, an invitation rather than a command. "Trust me, Evelyn. Just a little longer." She looked at his outstretched hand, pale, elegant, belonging to a creature that shouldn't exist. She thought of the list of names, the decades of loss, the loneliness that shadowed every corner of this house. She took his hand. "Show me," she said. And Matthias Ashford, ancient vampire of House Ashford, led her deeper into the mysteries of his world. Chapter 6. The Price of Blood. Matthias led Evelyn through corridors she hadn't explored, deeper into the house where the walls grew older and the air took on a different quality. Heavier, dense with centuries of secrecy. "Where are we going?" she asked, her hand still in his. His skin had warmed slightly from the contact, she noted, as if her living heat could kindle something in his undead flesh. "To the heart of the house, where the oldest magic still holds." He stopped before a door carved with symbols she didn't recognize, spirals and crescents, wolves and winter stars. "What I'm about to show you is knowledge few humans possess. If you'd rather not see..." "I want to see," Evelyn interrupted. "You said transparency goes both ways. Show me your world, Matthias." He studied her face in the dim candlelight, then nodded. The door opened at his touch, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. They went down. Down past the foundation of the house, past layers of stone that predated the building above. The air grew cool and still, and Evelyn realized they'd entered something far older than Ashford House. A space carved from the bedrock itself, ancient and deliberate. The staircase opened into a chamber that stole Evelyn's breath. It was a sanctuary of sorts, circular and domed with walls covered in more of those strange symbols. But what drew her eye was the center, a stone altar, and above it, suspended in midair by no visible means, a crystal vessel filled with dark liquid that caught the candlelight like rubies. "Blood," she breathed. Donated blood, freely given and preserved by old magic. Matthias moved to the altar with something approaching reverence. "This is how I feed without hunting, without taking from those who don't consent. Every month volunteers come to the old district, humans who know what we are, who understand the covenant. They give blood in exchange for protection, for favors, for the knowledge that they're helping maintain the old laws." Evelyn moved closer, fascinated despite herself. "They volunteer? To feed vampires?" "To feed specific vampires, yes. House Ashford has protected the humans of this district for 4 centuries. We don't allow rogue vampires to hunt here. We enforce the consent laws. In return, some humans choose to sustain us." He gestured to the crystal vessel. "This blood is willingly given. No violence, no compulsion, just exchange." "But you could compel them," Evelyn said, understanding dawning. "You could make anyone do anything, couldn't you? With your power, your speed." "I could," Matthias agreed quietly. "Many vampires do, but the covenant forbids it, and more than that." He turned to face her fully. "I've seen what happens when my kind treats humans as cattle. I've watched cities burn when vampire lords grew too bold, when they forgot that consent and mutual respect are what separate us from the monsters in your stories. I won't become that. I won't dishonor the memory of everyone I've loved by treating their descendants as food." The conviction in his voice was absolute. Evelyn found herself believing him. This ancient creature who'd built an entire system around consent, who'd rather starve than violate the rules he'd sworn to uphold. "Will you feed now?" she asked. I must. Tomorrow's trial will require every ounce of strength I possess. Varric will bring allies, and if the Night Court rules against him... Matthias reached up, and the crystal vessel descended into his hands as if responding to his will. There will be a formal challenge. Single combat, to the death. Evelyn's stomach dropped. You didn't tell me that. Because it's not certain. But it's likely. Varric won't accept judgment quietly. He'll invoke the right of challenge, and I'll have to answer. It's the old way. He held the vessel carefully, reverently, which means I need to be ready to fight. He lifted the crystal to his lips and drank. Evelyn watched, unable to look away. His throat worked, swallowing the dark liquid, and even from several feet away she could see the transformation. Color, subtle but present, crept into his skin. His silver eyes brightened, becoming almost luminous. When he lowered the vessel, his lips were stained red, and something about him seemed more solid, more present, as if the blood had anchored him more firmly to reality. It's beautiful, she said without thinking, and terrible. Yes. Matthias set the empty vessel back on the altar, where it rose again to its suspended position. Both things at once. That's what we are, Evelyn. Beautiful and terrible. Cursed with eternity, but sustained by life stolen from others. Even when that life is freely given, it's still stolen. Still a reminder that we're parasites dressed in human skin. The self-loathing in his words cut through her. You're not... I am, he said firmly. We all are. The difference is whether we acknowledge it and try to be worthy of the gift, or whether we revel in the power and forget the cost. He moved toward her, his movements now carrying a barely contained energy that hadn't been there before. You asked why I maintain the old laws. This is why. Because without rules, without ethics, we're nothing but predators. And I've been a predator long enough to know that's no way to spend eternity. Evelyn wanted to argue, to tell him that any creature capable of such self-reflection couldn't be a simple monster. But before she could speak, Matthias stiffened. Someone's at the gate, he said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. 3 of them, Varric's people. How do you know? I can hear their heartbeats. Smell their fear and bravado mixed together. His eyes had gone hard, predatory. They're testing the wards, seeing how strong the protections are. Evelyn's hand found his arm without conscious thought. What do we do? We? Nothing. You stay here in the sanctuary. These wards are the oldest in the house. Nothing can penetrate them without my explicit permission. He covered her hand with his own, the gesture surprisingly gentle. I'll deal with them. Matthias, trust me, Evelyn. This is what I've done for 4 centuries. Protecting my territory. Protecting my people. His expression softened slightly. Protecting you. Before she could protest, he was moving. That inhuman speed carrying him up the spiral stairs and out of sight, leaving her alone in the circular chamber with nothing but candlelight and ancient symbols for company. Above her, she heard the distant sound of the front door opening, then voices, Matthias's steady and commanding, others rough with false courage. Lord Ashford, one of the intruders called. We're here on Lord Varric's business. He wants to know if you've reconsidered his offer. Tell Varric, Matthias replied, his voice carrying down through the stone, that I'll give him my answer tomorrow night, in front of the Night Court, in front of all the assembled houses. And the woman? The human witness? Silence. Then, the woman is under my protection. Touch her, approach her, even think about her too loudly. And I'll tear out your throats before Varric can blink. The threat was delivered conversationally, but Evelyn heard the absolute certainty beneath it. The promise of violence from a creature who'd spent centuries perfecting the art of killing. She heard footsteps retreating. The gate clanging shut. Then after a long moment, Matthias's voice drifted down the stairs. They're gone. You can come up now. Evelyn climbed the spiral staircase on trembling legs, emerging to find Matthias standing in the hallway, looking perfectly composed except for the dangerous glitter in his silver eyes. Tomorrow night, he said quietly. Everything changes. The Night Court will judge Varric, and I'll likely have to fight him. If I lose, you won't lose, Evelyn said with more confidence than she felt. His smile was sad. Your faith is touching, but Varric is strong, and He stopped himself. I'm tired, Evelyn. 400 years tired. Sometimes I wonder if that's enough of a disadvantage to tip the scales. Evelyn crossed the distance between them and did something she'd never imagined herself doing. She took both of the vampire's hands in hers. Then don't fight tired, she said. Fight for something. Fight for your house. Fight for the humans you protect. Fight because the alternative is letting someone like Varric write the new rules. Matthias stared down at their joined hands, something unreadable crossing his features. When did you become so fierce? He asked softly. When I decided I was done being a victim, Evelyn replied. Now rest. Tomorrow night we face this together. Together, he echoed, as if the word were foreign, as if he'd forgotten what it meant, but he didn't let go of her hands. Chapter 7. The Night Court. The evening of the third day arrived with the weight of inevitability. Evelyn spent the hours before sunset, preparing herself in ways that felt absurdly inadequate. She bathed in the ornate bathroom attached to Elena's room, her room now, she supposed. She found a dress in the wardrobe that fit well enough, deep burgundy velvet from the 1960s, elegant and somber. When she looked in the tarnished mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like she belonged to another era, like she belonged in this house. A knock at her door made her turn. Come in. Matthias entered and Evelyn's breath caught. Gone were the casual clothes of the past 2 days. He wore formal attire that seemed pulled from a century past. A black coat with silver buttons, a vest embroidered with wolves and winter stars, trousers that fit him like they'd been tailored to his exact specifications. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, the inhuman perfection of his features. He looked like a lord from an old painting. Ancient and terrible and beautiful. You're staring, he observed, though his tone held no mockery. You look different, Evelyn said. Like what I am? Yes. The night court requires formality, tradition. We dress as our houses have always dressed. We're the symbols of our lineage. He gestured to the silver wolf embroidered on his vest. House Ashford, first house, Winter's children, and Varric. House Corvin wears ravens and blood-red rubies. They've always been drawn to carrion and prophecy. His expression darkened. He'll be dressed like a king tonight, trying to look like the ruler he wants to become. Evelyn moved closer, adjusting the collar of his coat without thinking. The gesture felt intimate, domestic, and she saw surprise flicker in his silver eyes. You'll look more impressive than him, she said firmly. You carry yourself like someone who's earned authority. He'll just look like someone desperate for it. When did you become an expert in vampire politics? But there was warmth in his voice, something almost like gratitude. When I decided my survival depended on understanding them. She stepped back, smoothing her borrowed dress. Am I presentable? For your night court? Matthias's gaze traveled over her slowly, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something unmistakably male in his expression. Appreciation, desire, carefully controlled. You're more than presentable, he said quietly. You look like you belong at my side. The words hung between them, laden with meanings neither seemed ready to examine. The court won't harm you, Matthias continued, his tone becoming more businesslike. You're there as my witness and my guest, but you must follow the rules precisely. Don't speak unless directly addressed by the council. Don't look the elder vampires directly in the eyes. They consider it a challenge. And stay close to me, always. I understand. Do you? He moved closer, his intensity suddenly focused entirely on her. Evelyn, if this goes badly, if Varric's challenge succeeds, you run. There's a passage beneath the house that leads to the old cathedral's catacombs, then out to the waterfront. I've arranged for a boat, money, papers, everything you need to disappear. I'm not running, Evelyn said. You will if I command it. His hands found her shoulders, grip firm, but not painful. Promise me. If I fall, you don't try to help. You don't stay and plead. You run, and you don't look back, she wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that she'd spent 6 months running from Thomas's debts and she was done fleeing. But the fear in his eyes, real fear, the first she'd truly seen from him, stopped her. I promise, she lied. He seemed to know it was a lie, but nodded anyway. Then it's time. The court convenes at midnight. We have an hour to reach the cathedral. The old cathedral stood in the heart of Grey Hollow's forgotten district, a Gothic monstrosity that municipal records claimed had burned in 1847. But as Matthias led Evelyn through a gate marked with the same symbols as his sanctuary, she saw that the building was very much intact, just hidden, wrapped in magic that made mortal eyes slide away from it. Glamour, Matthias explained, sensing her confusion. Old magic. The humans see only ruins. We see what remains. Inside, the cathedral was breathtaking. Stained glass windows depicted not saints, but vampires. Ancient lords in formal dress, surrounded by wolves and ravens and other creatures of the night. Candles burned in iron chandeliers, casting dancing shadows across stone floors worn smooth by centuries of feet. And vampires, dozens of them, gathered in the pews like a congregation waiting for mass. Evelyn felt their attention turn to her like a physical weight. Silver eyes, gold eyes, eyes the color of blood, all fixed on the human woman who dared enter their sacred space. Steady, Matthias murmured, his hand finding the small of her back. You're under my protection. They can't touch you. They walked down the center aisle together, and Evelyn forced herself not to flinch at the predatory gazes following their progress. She'd faced angry creditors, dismissive solicitors, men who'd tried to corner her in dark streets. She could face vampires. At the front of the cathedral, a dais held 7 ornate chairs. 6 were occupied by vampires so ancient they barely seemed real, more like statues carved from marble, their faces expressionless and cold. The 7th chair was empty. The Council of Elders, Matthias whispered. They're the oldest of us. They've seen empires rise and fall. They hold the covenant in their keeping. As they reached the front, a figure stepped from the shadows. Tall, elegant, dressed in black and crimson with ravens embroidered across his chest. His eyes were the color of old blood, and his smile was a predator's grin. Matthias, he said, voice carrying through the cathedral. How fortunate that you survived. I'd worried my associates might have been overzealous. Varric. Matthias's voice was ice. I'm here to answer your attempted murder with the only response the covenant allows. Trial before the assembled houses. Yes, about that. Varric's gaze slid to Evelyn, and she felt it like hands on her skin, invasive, assessing. You've brought a pet. How quaint. Does she know what happens to human witnesses who learn too much about our world? She's under my protection, Matthias said flatly. Harm her, threaten her, and you'll answer to me. If you survive the night, Varric replied smoothly. A voice spoke from the dais, old as mountains, cold as winter graves. Enough. The night court is convened. Lord Matthias Ashford, you stand before us claiming violation of the covenant by Lord Varric of House Corvin. Present your evidence. Matthias stepped forward, and his voice carried with centuries of authority. 3 nights ago, Lord Varric ambushed me during neutral hours. I was defending my territory, Varric interrupted. Ashford has been encroaching on Corvin hunting grounds for months. I merely... Silence. The elder's word cut through the cathedral like a blade. You will have your turn to speak, Varric. Ashford, continue. What followed was an hour of testimony, Matthias presenting evidence of the attack, Varric offering counterclaims that grew increasingly desperate, other vampires standing to speak for or against both parties. The politics were complex, Byzantine, centuries of alliances and feuds playing out in formal language and barely veiled threats. Evelyn watched it all, understanding finally why Matthias seemed so weary. This was his existence. Endless political games, ancient grudges, rules that bound him even as others sought to break them. Finally, the eldest vampire spoke again. We have heard sufficient testimony. The council will deliberate. The 6 ancient vampires leaned together, conferring in voices too low for even vampire ears to catch clearly. The cathedral held its breath. Then, the council finds Lord Varric guilty of covenant violation. The prescribed penalty is, I invoke the right of challenge, Varric declared, his voice ringing through the space. Single combat. The victor's truth becomes law. The elder vampire's expression didn't change. Lord Ashford, do you accept this challenge? Matthias's hand tightened on Evelyn's arm for just a moment. Then he released her and stepped forward. I accept. The cathedral erupted into motion. Vampires rose from pews, forming a circle around a clear space before the dais. The ancient ritual was beginning, a trial by combat that would end with one vampire dead and turned to ash. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd promised to run if this went badly, but as she watched Matthias remove his coat, saw him prepare to fight for his life and his house and the laws he'd upheld for 4 centuries, she knew she wouldn't keep that promise. Whatever happened next, she would face it here, with him. Chapter 8. Blood and Ash. The circle of vampires pressed close, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. This was entertainment to them, Evelyn realized with horror. Ancient creatures watching 2 of their own fight to the death like Romans at the Colosseum. Matthias stood in the center of the cleared space, his shirt removed, revealing the pale perfection of his torso. The wounds from 3 nights ago had vanished completely, leaving only unmarred skin that seemed to glow in the candlelight. Across from him, Varric was stripping off his own formal wear, revealing a body built for violence, broader than Matthias, more heavily muscled, covered in scars that shouldn't exist on vampire flesh. Silver wounds, Matthias said quietly, noticing her staring. They leave marks even on us. Varric has survived many challenges. He's a born killer. And you're not? Evelyn whispered. His silver eyes met hers. I'm a soldier. There's a difference. Soldiers fight when they must. Killers fight because they enjoy it. One of the elder vampires rose from the dais, holding an ornate wooden box. The challenge is issued and accepted. The terms combat until one party yields or is destroyed. No weapons save those you were born with. No magic save what flows in your blood. No intervention from the assembled witnesses. The elder's ancient gaze swept the circle. These rules are absolute. Violation means death for the violator and their entire house. The finality in those words sent ice through Evelyn's veins. If she tried to help Matthias, everyone in House Ashford would die. The rules weren't just tradition. They were law enforced by creatures old enough to make God seem young. Begin, the elder intoned. Varric moved first, a blur of inhuman speed that crossed the space between them in a heartbeat. His claws, elongated fingernails sharp as razors, raked toward Matthias's throat. Matthias wasn't there. He'd moved with equal speed, circling around to strike at Varric's exposed side. His own claws tore through flesh, drawing black blood that hissed when it hit the stone floor. The vampires moved too fast for human eyes to follow completely. Evelyn caught glimpses. Matthias dodging, Varric lunging, both of them supernatural blurs of violence. The sound of their combat was terrible. Flesh tearing, bones cracking, growls that came from throats that had forgotten how to be human. Varric caught Matthias across the chest. 4 parallel slashes that wept black blood. Matthias retaliated with a strike to Varric's throat that would have decapitated a human. The assembled vampires hissed with approval or dismay depending on their allegiances. You're slow, Ashford, Varric taunted, circling. 4 centuries of playing protector have made you weak, made you soft, and you've spent those same centuries killing without purpose, Matthias replied, breathing hard. Power without honor, strength without wisdom. Honor? Varric laughed, the sound ugly. Honor is what the weak tell themselves when they've lost. There's only power, Matthias, and those strong enough to take it. He lunged again, and this time Matthias was a fraction too slow. Varric's claws caught his shoulder, spinning him around. Before Matthias could recover, Varric was on him, slamming him against the stone floor with force that cracked the ancient flagstones. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a scream. Around her, vampires leaned forward hungrily, scenting blood and imminent death. Varric pinned Matthias down, claws poised above his heart. Any last words, old lord? Yes. Matthias's eyes found Evelyn's across the circle. Something passed between them. Regret, perhaps, or apology. I'm sorry I couldn't... He never finished. Instead, with a warrior's instinct born of centuries, he twisted beneath Varric's grip, not trying to escape, but to turn the position into something else. His legs came up, wrapping around Varric's neck, and with brutal efficiency he wrenched sideways. The crack echoed through the cathedral. Varric's neck twisted at an unnatural angle. He gasped, claws scrabbling, and Matthias used that moment to throw him off. Both vampires rose to their feet, but Varric was staggering, his head hanging at a grotesque angle as his body tried desperately to heal the damage. "You should have aimed for the heart," Matthias said coldly. "Necks can heal." Hearts turned to ash. He moved with purpose now, no longer defensive. His claws extended fully, longer than Varric's, she noticed, wickedly sharp and gleaming. He struck like a serpent, driving his hand into Varric's chest with such force that it punched through ribs and flesh to grasp what lay beneath. Varric's eyes went wide. His mouth opened in a soundless scream. Matthias pulled. His hand emerged holding Varric's heart, a blackened, shriveled thing that still pulsed weakly. The assembled vampires went utterly silent. "For violation of the covenant," Matthias said, his voice carrying through the cathedral. "For attacking without honor. For threatening those under my protection. I claim your life, Varric of House Corvin." He crushed the heart in his fist. Varric's body ignited, not with flame, but with something worse. A dissolution. Flesh turning to ash in seconds. Clothes and jewelry clattering to the stone floor as the vampire who'd worn them ceased to exist. Within moments, nothing remained but dust and the metallic scent of death. Matthias stood alone in the circle, covered in black blood, Varric's and his own, breathing hard, his silver eyes blazing with an intensity that made him seem more god than monster. The elder vampire rose from the dais. "The challenge is satisfied. Lord Matthias Ashford stands victorious. House Corvin's territories and assets are forfeit, to be divided among the remaining houses according to..." The cathedral doors exploded inward. Vampires poured through the entrance, dozens of them, wearing the raven sigil of House Corvin. They'd been waiting outside, Evelyn realized, waiting for their lord to fall so they could attack while Matthias was wounded and weakened. "Treachery," someone shouted, the elder's voice cut through the chaos. "They violate the covenant! They attack on sacred ground!" But the Corvin vampires didn't care about the covenant anymore. Their house was destroyed, their lord dead. They had nothing left to lose and everything to gain if they could kill Matthias now and claim his territory through sheer force. The cathedral descended into violence. House vampires leaped to defend their territory, ancient alliances activated in seconds. But the Corvin rebels had numbers and desperation on their side, and they were pushing toward Matthias. Evelyn saw it happening as if in slow motion. Matthias turning toward the new threat. His body still healing from the fight with Varric. 3 Corvin vampires breaking away from the main assault, moving with coordinated precision toward him. He couldn't fight them all. Not wounded, not after expending so much strength. They were going to kill him. Evelyn's hand found the iron candelabra beside her. It was heavy, ornate, ancient, and it was the only weapon within reach. She didn't think. Thinking was for people who had time, who had options. She swung with every ounce of strength she possessed. The candelabra caught the lead vampire across the temple. Iron and holy wax, both anathema to vampires, both burning on contact. The creature shrieked, stumbling, and in that moment of distraction, Matthias moved. He tore through the first vampire's throat, evashed the second's claws, drove his fist through the third's chest with brutal efficiency. But more were coming. The cathedral had become a war zone, and Evelyn stood in the center of it with nothing but an iron candelabra and a desperate need to survive. Matthias appeared at her side, his hand finding hers. "I told you to run," he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only something that might have been wonder. "I'm terrible at following orders," Evelyn replied. His laugh was breathless. "Yes, I'm learning that." Around them, the battle raged. Above them, the elder vampires watched with cold interest, apparently unwilling to intervene now that the covenant had been so thoroughly violated. "The passage," Matthias said urgently, "behind the altar. It leads to the catacombs. We run. Now." "Together," Evelyn said firmly. "Together," he agreed, and hand in hand, a vampire lord and a widow ran from the burning cathedral into the darkness beneath the city, while behind them the night court tore itself apart. Chapter 9. Beneath the city. The catacombs beneath Grey Hollow were older than the cathedral. older than the city itself. Evelyn ran through tunnels carved from living rock, her hand clasped tightly in Matthias's, her breath coming in ragged gasps while he moved with inhuman endurance beside her. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit echoed through the stone, footsteps, shouts, the terrible howling of vampires who tasted blood and wanted more. How many? Evelyn managed between breaths. Too many. Matthias pulled her down a branching passage, his eyes glowing in the darkness, providing the only light. The Corvin rebels have nothing to lose now. They'll hunt us until dawn forces them to ground. Then they'll wait and hunt us again. The elders, won't they stop this? The elders don't interfere once the covenant is broken. We're on our own. He stopped suddenly, pressing her against the cold stone wall, his body shielding hers. Quiet. Footsteps passed nearby. 3 vampires moving with predatory grace through adjacent tunnels. Evelyn held her breath, feeling Matthias's stillness, the way he'd gone absolutely motionless in that way only the dead could manage. His hand covered her mouth gently, preventing even the smallest sound. The footsteps faded. Matthias waited another 30 seconds before moving. This way. The waterfront passage is close. They ran again, and Evelyn's body screamed in protest. She wasn't built for this. Weeks of poor food, months of grief and stress, had left her weakened. But she forced her legs to keep moving because the alternative was death for both of them. The tunnel opened suddenly, into a larger chamber, a vault carved with those same spiral symbols she'd seen throughout Ashford. House. In the center stood a stone sarcophagus, its lid carved with a sleeping figure, a woman with a crown of winter stars. The First Lady Ashford, Matthias said quietly, slowing. She founded my house in 1356. She's the one who wrote the original covenant, who convinced the vampire lords to accept rules over chaos. Why are we stopping? Evelyn gasped. Because they'll search every tunnel. But they won't enter this chamber. It's sacred ground, protected by oaths older than any of the rebels. He guided her to sit against the sarcophagus, then knelt beside her, his wounds still visible across his chest and shoulder. We rest here. Catch your breath. By dawn, they'll have to retreat to their sanctuaries. Evelyn's laugh was half sob. And then what? We can't hide forever. No. Matthias's expression was grim in the silver glow of his eyes. But we can survive until the elders restore order. They'll have to now. The covenant is broken. If they don't act, every vampire in the city will descend into war, and that will expose us all to the human world. He sat fully, leaning against the stone beside her, and for the first time since the cathedral, Evelyn truly looked at him. Black blood covered his torso, his hair had come loose from its binding, and exhaustion showed in every line of his face. He looked ancient and vulnerable all at once. You're hurt, she said, reaching toward the wounds on his chest. They'll heal. But he didn't stop her when her fingers traced the edges of the claw marks. His skin was cool beneath her touch, and she felt his muscles tense at the contact. You could have died, Evelyn whispered. In the circle, when Varric had you pinned, but I didn't. Thanks in part to you. His hand covered hers, pressing it flat against his chest where his heart should have been beating but wasn't. You broke the rules, Evelyn. You intervened in a formal challenge. You could have been killed for that. I know. Then why? She met his silver eyes in the darkness, seeing her own reflection there, wild-haired and desperate, still beautiful in the borrowed dress, still fierce despite everything. Because I've spent 6 months watching myself disappear, becoming smaller and quieter and more invisible with every debt collector, every pitying look, every door closed in my face. And then I met you and you made me feel... She stopped, struggling for words. Feel what? His voice had dropped to barely a whisper. Alive, she finished. For the first time since Thomas died, maybe for the first time ever, I felt like I mattered. Like what I did, what I chose, actually meant something. Her hand curled against his chest. I wasn't going to let them take that away. Take you away. Matthias stared at her for a long moment, something transforming in his expression. Then slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. 432 years, he said softly. I've spent 432 years keeping humans at a distance. Protecting them, yes, but never letting them close. Never allowing myself to care because caring means loss. And I'd already lost so many. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. And then you walked into my house bleeding and desperate. And in 3 days you've undone centuries of carefully maintained solitude. Is that a bad thing? Evelyn asked, though she thought she already knew the answer. It's terrifying, he admitted. You'll age. You'll die. You'll leave me like everyone else has left me. And I'll add your name to my list and spend the next century wondering why I allowed myself to feel anything at all. Then don't think about the next century. Think about now. About these 3 days. She turned her head slightly, her lips nearly brushing his. Think about the fact that we're alive, Matthias. Both of us. Against all odds. Evelyn! Her name on his lips was half prayer, half warning. I know what you are, she continued. I know what this is. Impossible, temporary, probably foolish. But I don't care. I'm done being the grieving widow who lets life happen to her. She stopped, gathering courage. I want to choose something for myself. I want to choose you. The last distance between them dissolved. Matthias kissed her with a gentleness that belied his nature. His lips cool but soft, tasting faintly of blood and something else. Something ancient and wild and utterly intoxicating. Evelyn's hand slid into his hair, pulling him closer, and his arm wrapped around her waist with careful strength. The kiss deepened. His control wavered. She felt it in the way his grip tightened, the way his breathing quickened despite having no need to breathe at all. When his lips parted, she caught a glimpse of fangs, sharp and deadly, and instead of fear, she felt a thrill of dark excitement. Evelyn, he said against her mouth. If we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. The blood bond between vampire and willing human it's powerful, binding. You'd be marked as mine in ways the Covenant recognizes. Good, she whispered. Let them see. Let every vampire in this city know I chose you. His laugh was shaken. Reckless woman. Beautiful, reckless woman. He kissed her again, less gently this time, and she felt the centuries of loneliness in that kiss, the desperate need for connection, for warmth, for something that made immortality bearable. Above them, in the tunnels, the hunt continued. But here, in the sacred chamber of the First Lady Ashford, a vampire lord and a widow discovered that even the undead could remember what it meant to feel alive. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless in their own ways, Matthias rested his head against hers again. When we escape this, he said quietly, when the danger has passed, I'm going to give you a choice. What choice? To stay mortal, with all the pain and beauty that entails. Or, he paused, the weight of the offer heavy between them. Or to join me in darkness. To become what I am. Evelyn's heart hammered. The offer she'd known was coming. Had been inevitable from the moment their fates intertwined. Immortality, eternity, an existence outside of human limitations. I don't know what I'll choose, she admitted. I know. And I won't rush you. I won't compel you. Whatever you decide, it will be freely given. His silver eyes held hers. But know this, Evelyn Clark. Whether you have 50 years or 500, I want them. All of them. With you. Outside the chamber, dawn was breaking somewhere above ground. The sounds of pursuit had faded, the vampires retreating to their sanctuaries, forced by the sun to abandon the hunt. They had survived the night, but the real choice, the one that would determine everything, still lay ahead. Chapter 10. Dawn's Promise. They emerged from the catacombs as the sun climbed over Grey Hollow's rooftops, painting the city in shades of gold and rose that seemed obscene after the darkness below. Matthias moved carefully, keeping to the shadows beneath awnings and overhangs. Direct sunlight wouldn't kill him. That was a myth, he'd explained, but it weakened him severely, draining his strength and making him vulnerable. In full daylight, even a human could overpower an ancient vampire. The boat, he said, pointing toward the waterfront where a small craft waited at a private dock. We'll be safe once we're on the water. I have a property upriver, remote, protected. We can shelter there while the elders clean up this mess." But before they could take another step, figures materialized from the morning mist. Not vampires, humans. 12 of them, wearing the dark clothing of Varric's servants. The same men who'd hunted Evelyn through the rain 3 nights ago. "Lord Ashford," the leader called, his hand resting on something concealed beneath his coat. Lord Varric left instructions. If he fell, we were to collect his assets, including any loose ends. "Varric is dead," Matthias said flatly, positioning himself between Evelyn and the humans. "His house is dissolved. You have no master to serve." "We have no house," the man agreed, "which means we're free of the Covenant's restrictions. No vampire law prevents us from killing you now, weakened as you are. And once you're Ash, the woman is ours." Evelyn felt Matthias tense, his body preparing for violence despite his depleted state. He could still fight, but not 12 armed humans in daylight, not without exposing his weakened condition to anyone watching. The humans began to advance, forming a loose circle. One pulled a crossbow from beneath his coat, wooden bolts she saw, their tips glistening with something silver. "Matthias," Evelyn whispered, her mind racing. 3 days ago, she would have been paralyzed with fear, but 3 days ago, she hadn't extracted silver from a vampire's flesh, negotiated terms with an immortal lord, or struck a rebel vampire with an iron candelabra. 3 days ago, she'd been a different woman. "The sun," she said quietly. "You said it weakens you. Does it weaken all vampires equally?" "Yes, but there are no other vampires here." Matthias stopped as understanding dawned in his silver eyes. "Evelyn, no. That's too dangerous. More dangerous than this?" She squeezed his hand once, then stepped forward before he could stop her. "Gentlemen," she called out, her voice carrying across the dock with surprising strength. "You're making a mistake," the leader laughed. "Are we? You're just a widow with no family, no resources, no one who'd miss you. And he gestured at Matthias with contempt. "A monster playing at civilization. The world won't mourn either of you." "Perhaps," Evelyn agreed. "But it will notice what happens here. You see, Lord Ashford isn't the only vampire aware of this location." She improvised desperately, pulling together fragments of knowledge from 3 days of transparency and trust. House Ashford has alliances. House Morwen, House Sylvain. Even now they're watching, waiting to see if the humans of Grey Hollow understand the Covenant well enough to leave this matter to vampire justice. "She's bluffing," one of the men muttered. "Am I?" Evelyn took another step forward, and she saw doubt flicker across several faces. "You served House Corvin. You know vampire politics. You know what happens when humans interfere in house matters without sanction. The elders may not have stopped last night's chaos, but they will absolutely destroy humans who threaten the balance. It was a gamble based on 3 days of learning vampire law, of understanding that the Covenant existed not just to control vampires, but to protect them, to prevent the kind of human vampire, warfare that would expose both species to mutual destruction." The leader's expression hardened. "Enough talk." He raised his crossbow, aiming at Matthias's heart. "If the elders want to punish us, they can try. After you're both dead." Time seemed to slow. Evelyn saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw Matthias begin to move, knowing he wouldn't be fast enough in his weakened state, saw her own death arriving on a silver-tipped bolt because she'd chosen to stand with a vampire instead of running. She didn't regret it. The bolt flew and shattered in midair, struck by something moving faster than human eyes could track. A figure materialized between them and the humans. A woman, tall and impossibly beautiful, with hair like spun silver and eyes that burned gold. She wore modern clothes but moved with the bearing of ancient royalty. "That will be quite enough," she said, her voice resonating with power that made the humans stumble backward. "I am Lady Morwen, Elder of the First Council, and you have just attempted to murder a First House Lord under my protection." More vampires appeared from the shadows, too many to count, all wearing different house sigils, all radiating barely contained violence. The human servants paled, weapons dropping from nerveless fingers as they realized they stood surrounded by creatures who could tear them apart before they could blink. Lady Morwen turned to Matthias, her golden eyes assessing. "Lord Ashford, it seems your human companion was correct. We have been watching." The council does not take lightly the dissolution of House Corvin, nor the attack on sacred ground. Her gaze shifted to Evelyn. And we are intrigued by a mortal brave enough to intervene in a vampire challenge. She saved my life, Matthias said firmly, moving to stand beside Evelyn. Multiple times. She's earned my protection and my house. So we observed. Lady Morwen's smile was cold and beautiful. The question, Lord Ashford, is what you intend to do with this remarkable human. Will you keep her mortal, or will you petition the council for the right to turn her? The weight of the question settled over them like a physical thing. Every vampire present turned to look at Evelyn with new interest, evaluating, assessing, wondering what she would choose. Matthias's hand found hers again. That decision, he said carefully, belongs to her. Not to me, not to the council. To her alone. Indeed. Lady Morwen studied Evelyn with those ancient golden eyes. Then speak, mortal. You've walked through our world for 3 days. You've seen what we are, the beauty and the horror of it. You've been offered a choice few humans ever receive. What do you want? Every eye in the dock area fixed on Evelyn. The morning sun continued its climb, warming her skin in a way it would never warm Matthias's. She thought of Thomas's debts, of the empty house and the pitying neighbors. She thought of 6 months as a ghost in her own life. Then she thought of 3 days in Ashford House. 3 days of being seen, being trusted, being something more than a grieving widow with no future. 3 days with a vampire lord who looked at her like she was precious, who offered her transparency and protection, and something that might become love, given time. Time. That was what this choice really meant. 50 years or 500, mortality or eternity, the safety of staying human or the risk of becoming something else entirely. Evelyn looked at Matthias, at his silver eyes, at the hope and fear warring in his expression, at 400 years of loneliness written in every careful line of his body. She thought of the list of names in his library. All those people he'd loved and lost and mourned. She could join that list in 50 years, or she could stand beside him for centuries, building something new from the ruins of House Corvin's ambition. I want time, she said finally, her voice steady. Time to understand what becoming a vampire truly means. Time to see if what I feel now is real, or just the intensity of danger. Time to, she squeezed Matthias's hand, to be courted properly. By a gentleman who's had 4 centuries to learn how. Matthias's laugh was surprised and genuine. Courted? You want me to court you? I've already been married once to a man I barely knew, Evelyn said firmly. If I'm going to make another life-altering choice, I'd like to at least be properly wooed first. Flowers, poems, whatever it is vampires do when they're trying to win someone's heart. Lady Morwen's expression softened into something almost warm. Wise answer, mortal. You've chosen neither mortality nor immortality, but the space between. The chance to decide freely, without coercion of circumstance or emotion. She turned to Matthias. Lord Ashford, you will return to your house. You will rebuild. And you will give this woman the time she requests. The council will recognize her as under your protection. But her choice, when she makes it, must be wholly her own. It will be, Matthias promised. I swear it by my house and blood. Then this matter is settled. Lady Morwen gestured to the human servants, who stood frozen in terror. As for you, you will leave Grey Hollow by nightfall. If any of you return, if any of you speak of what you've seen, the Covenant's mercy ends. Do you understand?
They understood.
They scattered like leaves before a storm, desperate to escape with their lives. The assembled vampires began to disperse, melting back into the shadows of early morning. But Lady Morwen paused before leaving, her golden eyes fixing on Evelyn one last time. 3 days, she said quietly. 3 days, and you've changed the dynamics of an ancient house. Whatever you choose. Mortal, you've already left your mark on our world. Then she was gone, and Evelyn stood alone with Matthias in the morning light. So, he said after a moment, a smile playing at his lips, you want to be courted. I do, Evelyn confirmed. Is that acceptable? To you? Acceptable? His hand cupped her face gently. Evelyn, I've spent 4 centuries alone because I was terrified of the pain of losing someone. You're offering me the chance to actually live if you make the choice to join me in darkness. You're giving me time to prove I'm worth such a choice." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "It's more than acceptable. It's a gift." "Then take me home," she said softly, "to Ashford House, and show me what it means to build a life, mortal or otherwise, with someone who actually sees you." Matthias smiled. A real smile, warm and unguarded and beautiful. "With pleasure." They walked together toward the boat, hand in hand, as the sun climbed higher and the city of Grey Hollow woke to a new day. Behind them, the cathedral still smoldered from the night's violence. Ahead of them lay uncertainty, danger, and the complicated politics of vampire society. But between them was something neither had expected to find, a connection forged in blood and trust, in darkness and dawn, in 3 impossible days that had changed everything. Evelyn didn't know if she would choose immortality, but she knew she'd chosen Matthias, at least for now. At least for however long her mortal heart continued to beat. And for a vampire who'd spent centuries collecting names of the dead, that was more than he'd ever dared to hope for. It was enough.